Welcome to the latest Watercolors Aquarium Gallery podcast, brought to you from the Aquarium Rush Studios in downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan. My name is Ben.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Charles.
The topic of nano saltwater tanks has been blowing up. And it's weird. The fish that we sell now, if we have little teeny fish in, they sell. Big fish, I mean, we still move them, but not like the little stuff. Watchman gobies are like...
difficult to keep in stock at this point.
Mm-hmm. So
I'm
what does
like-
it take?
I was just about to make a joke, and I was like, I wonder if Watchman gobies are worth more than their weight in gold. Like, how much?
The Yashahazi certainly is.
Yeah. I was like,
I don't know how much gold is worth per ounce right now, but
Yeah.
some of those fish are definitely getting up there. They're like more printer ink prices.
Yeah, printer ink prices. That's a good one. That counts. So the popularity of nano aquariums in general is understandable from a cost perspective, from a space perspective, from a maintenance perspective. Although we got to be a little careful when we say that. It's not like you can do less maintenance on a nano tank. In fact,
Smaller maintenance.
yeah, maybe even more. Just doesn't take as long
Yeah.
because it's little and cute.
And a bucket's lighter than a barrel.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
a 50% water change on a 15-gallon tank is a very different time investment than a 20% water change on a 75-gallon system.
Yeah.
You
True.
know?
True.
Yeah. We're making this conversation a little bit more free-form on purpose just because I feel like it's a subject that a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their heads around as a whole. Like, there's a pretty established way to do big tanks at this point, you know, the sump, the skimmer, but I feel like there's a lot more little avenues that you can go down to do nano tanks, and I don't think that it's like a one established path either.
No, I agree. And I think that it opens up some pretty interesting possibilities as far as some of the creatures that you can keep in a nano tank that, like these Eviota and Trimagobies. So these are some of the smallest fish in the ocean. The adults are maxing out at like an inch. And if you tried to put that in a 75-gallon tank, you'd see it once.
Right.
But even the clownfish would think that was a good snack.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little encouraged by, I know Jake Phillips, when we talked to him, he's from Biota, he was saying that they have a group of them in the 300-gallon tank, and you get to see them, like, darting in and out of the rock work, because they're finding plenty of live food, they're hanging out in the rocks all the time. But you gotta understand, you still have to buy 10 of them.
Yeah.
And see part of them sometimes.
What do those go for? Like $60 a piece for a 3/4
The
inch
Trimas
fish?
definitely do, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Eviotas were a little bit less expensive,
Right.
but they're still saltwater fish prices.
Right. Right.
So I've got a good way to bite into it.
Cool.
What do you guys consider a nano tank for saltwater?
Yeah. Ooh. I think we kind of debated this when you talked about our top 5 nano saltwater fish, and I think we can continue the debate.
Yeah, that was a while ago. I mean, it was like a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
But this is a subject where all of our opinions are currently being developed. You know?
That's true, yeah. Because
So-
it's not a new method, it's just newly popular.
So it's not like we're changing our minds. We're just slowly figuring out our way to do it.
I've heard some people use the term nano tank and pico tank. And the pico would be like 2 gallons or smaller
Yeah.
for a pico. But, I mean, is a 29 still a nano?
I wouldn't say so.
I don't know that I would either.
I feel like it's right where it gets a little fuzzy for me. Some people will refer to anything less than 40 gallons as nano.
Right.
I adamantly disagree with
Yeah,
that.
that's
one,
just
though.
a little elitist, I think.
For me personally, I think 20 gallons or less, and you're allowed to laugh,
Yeah.
literally just because the definition of pico that exists in my brain is 2 gallons or less. So 10 times more than that is 20 gallons.
Oh, because you like the metric system.
Yes.
Right.
So then what does that make, I don't know, tanks that are in the 29 to 75 gallon range?
Those are just mid-sized tanks to me.
Yeah.
Those are little to me. I don't know if they're nano,
No.
but
Yeah.
they're small.
Smaller reef
Small.
tanks.
75 is like when you're 75 and bigger, then you're like, that's full on.
Yeah, I often tell people because so many people land on nano tanks when they're newer to the hobby, just because they kind of need to feel things out a little bit. And there are some people who I really have to push away from that. It's not about selling more stuff. It's just, I know they need more. So to me, 75 gallon is the best size for the starter real mixed reef.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. That's the smallest tank I would put a tang in, and there are only a few species of tangs I would put in there. Charles, of course, would say, no, you can't put those in there. That's too small.
I feel like you could do a Tamini in a 75 if you're the type of person that wants to do that.
Yeah. And I would put a Tamini, I would put a yellow, I would put a Scopus.
Oh, I could see a Scopus.
I would put a purple.
Oh, man. I'm not sure I would do a purple.
I would put a coal.
Yeah, some of the other bristletooths, other than Taminis and coals, stay kind of smaller,
They
too.
do. Yeah, all of them are yellow tang and smaller size as far as I'm concerned.
But this is about nanotanks.
This is about nanotanks. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think
There's
we're
where
trying
the
to
line is.
Yeah, we're trying to meld that definition. And there is not a single tang that can go in anything that anyone would describe as a nanotank.
Right. And really, most of the classic looking reef fish can't go in these tanks. The fox faces, the triggers, the puffers, the ones that you're going to look at and be like, that looks like a typical reef fish.
I've seen that on a stamp.
Yeah. Very few. In fact, I could think of 2 species of angelfish that I would put in 20 gallons or smaller.
Yeah, I think a pygmy angel was one of your 20-gallon picks.
Yes. I'd put that in a 20 gallon all day long.
Yeah, me too.
With 2 other really small fish, and you're done.
Yeah, like a pygmy angel and like a pair of watchman gobies or something like that, if you can find a good pair.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
I would do a pair of Ocellaris clowns. Not Perculus, but I would do Ocellaris clowns.
I think...
So, I want to go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yes, for me, this discussion, in my head anyways, was like how to set up a nano reef, not just like what could you put in it. So like, let's say let's do a 20-gallon reef.
Yeah.
How would you want to set it up?
Yeah.
Like what kind of equipment and stuff like that?
So here's, and I think, Amy, you were almost starting to touch on this point, and I think it's one of the funnest points when it comes to nano tanks and aquariums in general, where everyone thinks, what's the biggest tank I can do? And let's make it work. And when you're doing a nano tank, it's not what's the biggest tank you can do. It's let's do a tank that has the fish I want to keep in it. And because everything's smaller, it's less expensive and less of a commitment. So let's do it all out exactly the way I want it without compromise. That doesn't mean put absolutely everything on it, but don't compromise with anything you put on it. So that's how I would introduce my 20-gallon aquarium. And I would do a rimless 20-gallon tank, a 24 by 12 to get to 20 gallons, I think you got to be 20 inches tall. You might even get down to 17 inches on a 18-inch tall tank or something. Then I think I would still do the same tank in this. I would put a lid on it. I would put a lid on just about any saltwater tank. There's a whole bunch of rimless saltwater tanks out there that people are doing without lids. We've got one here. It makes me nervous. And the evaporation rate on a nano tank is just magnified. It's so magnified.
Yeah, people who don't have lids on their tanks either have new tanks, good luck, or too much money.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that I think might not jump most of the time that could go in a tank that size, clownfish.
I've
but it
definitely
happens.
seen them. Yeah, definitely seen it happen. I've seen a lot of people do the screen tops, and I think that that's acceptable, but you still got to make sure you're covering for evaporation on this tank. Yeah. The Red Sea or any of the other all-in-one systems out there in that 20-gallon size, I think they're great. But I'm going to stick to saying, here's my tank. I'm going to set it up, and I'm going to do a 20-gallon rimless, either an ADA or a Hydra, which, if any of you have seen those tanks, they're both in and of itself, empty, they look pretty. They're gorgeous. Hang on the back filter. I think I would probably go with a Seachem Tidal. I would put a Seache, one of the little Nano Seache circulation power heads in there. I would light it with an AI Prime. No, I wouldn't do... All right, all in. I would do the Nero 3. The AI Nero 3 circulation pump in there. A Fluval 150 watt heater. 10 pounds of live rock. 10 pounds of sand. 20 pounds of sand. One of the bags. What am I missing? Heat, light. Yeah.
It should be pretty much everything.
Yeah, I do the Seachem Tidal 35 on it so that I could clip the heater to the side of it, and that just makes it a little prettier. Or
I mean, with that Red Sea reefer system, it comes with a sump.
All in the back, I know. those sumps all in the back that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so let's pick at that. Like, what's the difference between setting up a tank yourself and going with an all-in-one, especially for small tanks? Like, you're going to get about an extra 10 gallons of water volume in the sump. That's a good plus for it right there if you can have one that works. I'm assuming they're roughly that size. I don't know exactly. But what else is a sump going to do for you? Could you keep more fish?
If you're increasing your holding capacity, the volume, then yeah, you're increasing the amount of fish you can put in the tank. God, now you got me wavering a little bit. Maybe my ultimate one would be that little Red Sea, or even one of the other little Nano all-in-ones that we have. But every single one of the ones that I've seen out there needs supplemental circulation. I don't think any of them have enough of a return pump. Even the ones with the IFS, the internal filtration system, or the filtration system in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Theoretically, one that does have a back filtration system, the return should be putting out more power, right? Because it doesn't need to go up 3 feet and out.
Right, but it's also going to be a teeny little pump.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's got to fit in the back of there.
It's got to fit in the back. Right. And so if you pop a little Nero 3 on there.
Those things are so cool.
They're so
For small
cool.
tanks, to be able to adjust and have different flow patterns, you can really make the most of that pump. Also doesn't stick out a bunch in your tank.
Yeah, they don't take up much space. And that's the big challenge with your nano tank is the amount of space that you're taking up.
Yeah, for the space that, let's say, a Hydor Corallia would take up compared to the Nero, that's like 2 coral frags.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are the Neros capable of like pulsing flow?
Yeah. Yeah, all kinds of programmability in a Nero.
That's cool.
They're pretty fully programmable, so you can set timelines of it too, so you could have it be in wave maker mode at night and in just a random pulsing pattern during the day.
So you're capable of linking multiple Neros to each other, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you wanted to like alternate like surge a little bit, oh man.
Yep.
Man, that's cool. Just because I don't pay that much attention to equipment until you guys are talking about it.
I know,
and then,
right?
like, you guys start talking about it, I'm like, wait, does that mean this? Oh, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that's something that's, like, it is going to help a little bit with your corals or whatever, but it just looks cool.
Yeah.
It does.
And that's worth it.
That's kind of why we do this, right? The whole point of this is so it looks cool.
Yeah, I love getting that question. Well, do you really need that? Well, do you really need an aquarium? Like, do you
Right.
like it or not?
Yeah.
I feel like in particular that like surge back and forth flow would look really, really cool in a macroalgae tank.
You got to watch that in a rimless tank, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get sloshed pretty easily with the surge.
I mean, that's true, but I'm not saying just blast it. I'm just saying the idea is to get the macroalgae to move in one direction and then the other slowly.
It makes me dizzy. I don't like it. There was a trend for a while, and I think Tunzi was putting out these wave boxes that, I mean, you could, for not a lot, they were really well engineered. And for not a lot of money, you could get this wave box that would slowly ramp itself up and use its own inertia to get it going even faster. And I don't get seasick. I've never gotten seasick in my entire life. But I stared at this thing and I felt myself start to rock back and forth.
That's
and I
so
couldn't
funny.
help it.
It's like Motion
Yeah.
sickness, yeah.
I didn't like it.
This is mildly off topic, but this is reminding me of a tank I saw someone make once where they had stuck a sump on their tank that was about 3 times the volume of the actual tank. And they had set it up as a tide pool tank.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
As in, like, the tank would lower in height? What's the word I want to use here?
Lower the water level.
Thank you. Lower the water level
Mm-hmm.
and then raise as, like, to simulate tide in that environmental condition of, like, the types of corals he was keeping. It was
I
crazy.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nano tanks don't have to be any less techy than big tanks. You can really jam a lot of cool, funky equipment into them.
Yes.
We'll come around to the end where I'm the person that does small nano tanks, but low tech, but that's not for this part of the discussion. That's later. For the people asking, what about that? Later.
Yeah.
We're going techie first. We'll calm down.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
that like dichotomy of high tech, low tech is pretty obvious in freshwater planted tanks. Like, it's talked about a lot, but I don't hear too many people refer to their reef tanks as either high tech or low tech. But there is a range of what you can do there.
Oh, for sure.
There's a lot of really cool equipment to be found.
Yeah, and equipment that, depending on the organisms you're trying to keep, just like with a high-tech planted tank, depending on the plants you want to keep, they're absolutely necessary. If you want a full-on SPS reef system, you have to have either a calcium reactor or a dosing pump. Yes, there are some people that do it by dosing their tanks every day, but you got to get techie with that stuff.
Yeah.
That's called being inhuman.
Right.
See, Amy described it to me once where she said you could do a 75-gallon tank mediocre, or you could do a really decked out, like, 20-gallon.
Yes.
For, like, the same price.
Exactly.
Yeah, the tank you described earlier, that's probably a $500 or $600 tank at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it needs to go in your office and look kick-ass all the time, that's
I think it would look pretty kick-ass.
Pretty well spent $500 or $600.
Yep.
So-
And then the Atlantic pygmy angel is one of my favorite little fish. I would put one of those in there, and boy, see, that's where all of a sudden these are where those tough decisions get made. Like, you got 2 more fish in this little 20-gallon tank, and clownfish personality is hard to beat, and I love the way they interact in pairs. But neon cleaner gobies are amazing.
Yeah.
And I love the yellow rose antenna gobies.
If it were me, I mean, now we're talking like all out,
Yeah.
but I always err on the side of as easy to maintain as possible.
Right.
So I would probably go with the tiny fish or like a cleaner shrimp or a pair of coral banded shrimp.
Or sexy shrimp.
Or sexy shrimp, yeah. Or you could even do like 10 of them in there. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure if the angel would eat them or not.
You're making a lot of sense there, Amy.
Okay, so skip the angel, or also do a 10-gallon tank next to it with like
The
30
little-
sexy shrimp in it. And a pygmy angel is a pet. We definitely talked about that a lot in the other episode.
We
but
did.
They got a lot of personality.
They're amazing.
Me personally, they're my favorite centropage. I just, nothing against coral beauties.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loves them. But the personality on Atlantic pygmy just is more endearing to me than a coral beauty.
Do you like little dogs too?
Not really.
No? Okay. Because they kind of remind me of a little dog. They think they're a big dog, but they're a little dog.
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do have that scrappiness.
Right.
What else can we put on the super high-tech one? Do they make nano calcium reactors? I've always wondered
They
about
do.
that.
Yeah. And they make some nano reactors that could go in the back for like a phosphate reactor and things like
Yeah.
that. And I would totally put one of those on there. You know what I would skip?
What's that?
Protein skimmer.
All right, go into the protein scammer. Protein skimmer, not scammer for a
Protein
small
scammer
tank.
for a small tank.
I
Right.
promise I wasn't trying to be cute right there.
So the protein skimmer is going to do some oxygenation, and it's going to remove some organic waste. That's what it's designed to do, and they do them really, really well. The other thing that removes a lot of organic waste is water changes. And on a 20-gallon tank, a 5-gallon water change where you're doing a 25% water change, it's really, really easy to do. 25% water change on that tank every week, no problem. Even a 50% water change, you're talking 10 gallons of water. That's That's just not hard to do. Now, granted, I'm really used to doing water changes on big reef tanks, and I do them all the time. So that doesn't seem like a huge deal to me. But I don't feel like there's a protein skimmer out there that really does well in a tight little package. I don't think there's good enough ones out there. Combine that with the fact that unless you have a static chamber to put that protein skimmer in, what I mean by that is a chamber where the water level doesn't change. You're going to be constantly adjusting that skimmer, or it's not going to be efficient all the time. So protein skimmer technology is very much based on the water pressure going into it, and water pressure is affected by the level of the water in whatever container it's in. That's why sumps have baffles. Yes, the IFS systems, the internal filtration systems, have baffles back in their chambers, and there's just one pump chamber, and you can get them in there. But then it's this teeny little thing that's like 2.5 inches in diameter.
You're removing like a quarter cup of gunk whenever you're doing it.
I don't know.
Just do a water
I could
change.
throw a polyfilter in there, or some ChemiClean, or some Purigen, and do a bigger water change, and not worry about what that protein skimmer is doing. And in my teeny little tank, if that thing overflows, who knows what's going to happen? Is it set up exactly right? Is there going to be a big thing sticking out of the back of my tank? I don't know. I'm not sold on protein skimmers for nano tanks.
I'm a little bit more ambivalent on them. I can see the argument for them where it's like, yeah, they're not as efficient as they could be, but they're still doing something. And I'm like, all right, fine, but I don't know. I say that as a person who doesn't own any small protein skimmers. So.
Yeah, like, would you be better off spending your $50 to $100 on a nice refugium setup, or
on chemical filtration media, and then that chamber where that protein skimmer goes, it's a nice big spot to put Purigen or Polyfilter or one of the great chemically absorbing filter medias out there. That's my personal take on it. I guess I'm quite public about that.
Yeah.
But
so I'm intentionally going to poke you.
Yeah, please do.
So if you're doing chemical filtration, though, you're just paying costs through time, though, instead of one upfront cost.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. $150 for a nano protein skimmer. That's 10 polyfilters, and a fifth of a polyfilter in a 20-gallon tank once a month is all you need.
So that works out to like 3 years worth of polyfilters?
Yeah. So
like if someone sits down and does the math and was like, will it be worth it if I have a tank set up for 5 years? Are you just going to say, yeah, okay, fine?
I'm going to say, but you didn't take into account the fact that you will also need a polyfilter. Just not as much of one.
might be able to change it out every other month instead of once a month?
Yeah, exactly. And in 3 years, I think if we did everything the same, only I changed out, let's say I changed out a polyfilter, a fifth of a polyfilter once a month, and you changed out a fifth of a polyfilter every 3 months, but had a protein skimmer. And sometimes, no, because we got to do that cost, we got to do it just like that. Yep. I think in 3 years, my tank's going to look better.
I guess there's an argument to be made that protein skimmers are a little bit less discriminate on what they pull out than, because it's pulling out basically anything charged.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to find another way to poke at it, but
Yeah, that's good.
That's pretty solid.
I'm good with being poked at that one because, yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason you can't find really much more to poke at is because it almost doesn't matter. Like, sure, you may as well have one, but also you may as well just do something else too.
Yeah.
Yep. That's
the reality is doing like water changes on a tank that size is going to cost you like $2.
Yeah.
You know?
And we're constantly getting asked, okay, what can I do so I don't have to do water changes? And my response is not have as cool of a tank.
Yeah. Or a lot of things that are more difficult than water changes. Just
like watching things die or scraping more algae or...
The thing that does go into it for nano tanks to me too is you do need to do probably more frequent or at least more important water changes than a bigger tank. Like that cumulative effect of constantly doing water changes on a big tank pays off. But in a nano tank, you kind of have to be doing that. You can't slack as much, usually.
Right.
But a lot of the times they're in small locations or somewhere where you really don't want salt creep and spills, and like that's the thing that's really hard for me to manage with nano tanks is where it's placed and how much more destructive saltwater is than freshwater.
True.
So like what are the ways to get around that? I don't want to pick up a 5-gallon bucket and dump it over my desk with my computer on it.
A little MaxiJet 1200 with some tubing to pump it out of the bucket.
And having the lid on, like we talked about, is also going to help to limit salt creep.
Yes. And
But
reduce evaporation.
That is definitely one of the negatives of trying to put a saltwater tank in one of those places where it might be a little bit risky.
Any aquarium that you're going to set up anywhere, you're going to have risk, but you got to do water changes, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So in that tank, as far as corals go, that's the other fun thing about a nano tank. A really nice, big, huge colony of like some of the beautiful blue and red acans or something like that. You can easily spend $300-400 on a 6-inch colony. On your little nano tank, we've got them right now for $89.99 for a 3-head, beautiful blue and red acan. That's all you need for your nano tank. You just need the little corals that are going to do it. Way less money invested in corals to make it look amazing.
Yeah, and you just like can't jam them all in there.
Right.
Like you'd have to be trimming constantly if you wanted to put 10 different types of corals in a 10-gallon tank. That one 10-gallon we have down there with the one nice favia in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the adorable pair of neon cleaner gobies.
That tank looks full and it looks gorgeous. And in livestock, it's a couple $100. If you wanted to do that in a big tank, you couldn't.
Right.
Because they don't exist.
Yeah. That's a fantastic little bitty tank that works so well and is really easy to maintain. It has a hang on the back. Is that an AquaClear 20 on it? And then that wave.
Yeah, I think it's just.
We got
it's
a twin
got a
star on there,
little
doesn't it?
Seche circulation pump on it, a little tiny heater, and yeah, we have a freshwater light, a twin star, fantastic full spectrum light combined with a pure blue strip.
It works in that tank. I'm not completely sold on that being our final lighting strategy for a nano tank like that.
Well,
But
good thing they
it's
don't make
getting
true
closer.
lumens anymore.
I know, exactly.
But that's the light setup that I have set up on my tank at home too, just because I don't really like any of the marine bar lights that are out there. If you got a good recommendation for one, I'd love to hear it, but there's no light I like better than the twin stars.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah. Now, if only they just made a reef one.
Right.
Like if Lifeguard made a reef one, that would be pretty cool.
Those lifeguards are pretty nice little lights, too.
They're nice.
And you could, with the expense of those, like, you could do 2 or even 3 of them for the same price as one of those fancy controllable, like, LEDs that are out there. I love the AI Prime, but every other small controllable LED for a saltwater tank doesn't make
cut
it.
Right.
Yeah, the AI is fantastic.
Have we tried the Kessel A80 on a tank like that yet?
I haven't, but
We
I'm
should
sure
give it a
it's
shot.
great.
It's Kessel, so you know.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fantastic.
Yeah.
You beat me to it. I was about to say that. And then I was like, oh, Ben's going to say something. And then he said Kessel. I was like,
Well,
dang it.
It's a more direct comparison. To me, the AIs and the Kessels are totally different animals.
Yes.
The AIs and like other controllable lights seem to be a more direct comparison. They're just in completely different fields of quality.
True.
You know, the fluval ones. They work just fine. They just don't get the job done.
They don't. Nope.
Maybe in a super shallow tank they would.
Yeah. And
Like a 20 high, that's too much for one of those to handle.
and really take your time controlling and tuning the spectrum on that light, because some of those LEDs grow corals, some of those LEDs grow algae.
Yeah.
Here's
And-
my honest to God opinion on lights that have the controllable spectrum. You just sold me a light without the right spectrum.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
It makes it DIY again.
Yeah, you made me pay extra for something that I have to assemble. That's bull.
So the AIs and the Radions both come with modes that are designed to do different things. And if you don't want to DIY it, you can say, I want my corals to grow fast. Push this button. Growing fast corals often are not as colorful. Or the lighting, let me rephrase that. The lighting to make corals grow fast is not necessarily the lighting that's going to make them the most colorful. And so there's another setting on that tank that you can switch, color mode, and have it so it is going to do the best light for bringing out the most color in your corals. They aren't necessarily going to grow as fast, but the color is going to be outstanding. So that kind of custom programmability or that kind of pre-programmed light, that works for me. The companies that don't do those pre-programmed options and don't tell you why it should be one way or the other, just make it look the way you want it. I'm not there. You guys did the testing. Don't rely on the consumer to say, okay, I know what it should be.
Yeah, we all know how that goes when it looks really bright.
Yeah.
I do love Kessel's approach to this issue too, though, where it's like, okay, you get perfect or perfect but more blue.
Right.
See, that's a philosophy I can get behind.
That works. It does. It works, and it works really well for them.
But on the other hand, if you're doing pretty basic corals, which honestly, doing Acropora in a tank that's 20 gallons or even any of the high demanding SPS, you're just going to be constantly fighting to maintain minerals, like all the time. If you're doing simple enough corals, the spectrum and the light, it's not going to be as big of a deal. Like if it looks the way that you want and it's not exactly precisely perfect, hammer corals and trumpet corals and mushrooms, they're not going to care that much.
No.
So it's all about what you want to get out of it.
I just like it for the fact that you can put, particularly with a nano tank, you don't necessarily want high growth. Mm-hmm. You can put it on, give me the best possible color for my corals.
Yeah.
And a lot of those lights will do that.
Yeah.
The AI primes, the Radions, they do
Does
that.
Does Radion make a teeny one? Or a smallish or an entry level one?
They don't make a competitor to the prime.
That's interesting.
No, they make the 15 and the 30.
Fair enough. The prime has about a 24-inch spread as
all
works
of those
for pretty much
lights
any
have
smaller,
a 24-inch spread.
Yeah,
it's just how much light they're putting into that 24 inches. Yeah. That's the fun thing about this nano talk, right? What I described originally with my, I wavered with my rimless or non-rimless, the internal filtration or the non-internal filtration and the wave maker and stuff like that. That's the high-tech version. But that teeny little, we touched on a little bit, that little 10-gallon tank that we have out there is so inexpensive and simple. And the fish that are in there are fantastic. They have everything that you want in a saltwater fish. The colors are unbelievably bright. They have amazing personalities. They interact with you. They get along with each other.
I don't feel like we're missing out on anything with that tank.
No, not at all.
So then maybe we should go to low tech. Talk about that a little bit more.
I mean,
I got a slight segue from high to low tech.
Sure.
I had someone make a very legitimate argument to me, and I'm kind of on the fence to me.
Okay.
Smaller tanks, it's much more worthwhile to spend the extra money for a nicer brand of salt because you're doing more water changes. So the theory there is that you're replenishing minerals via water changes.
right. And your corals are smaller, so they're not going to use them up as quickly.
Yeah.
All right. So what Charles is touching on a little bit there is one of my, some may call it an archaic philosophy. Some may call it an old school way of doing it. But the idea that there are kind of two different levels of salt out there. There are those levels of salt. There are those brands or types of salt that don't have any additives in them. Instant ocean. And there are those salts that come with all kinds of additives in them so that you, in theory, don't have to dose as much or at all, depending on what claim you're believing or what kind of corals you're keeping in your tank. My philosophy has always been, I'm going to plan on dosing because I want to be able to have some control over how much of what stuff goes in the system. And I want that consistency of knowing if I put in this amount, I know what's in the salt already, and I can put in this amount of calcium and this amount of magnesium, and I know what results I'm going to get. Some of the salts that make claims of what their levels of minerals are, they're not always as accurate as you might want them to be. And it's not necessarily at a level that's going to maintain itself between water changes. All right. So if you are using a salt that claims to have 450 parts per million calcium, and you're doing your water changes every 2 weeks, that means you're only replacing 20% of that 1,400 parts per million every 2 weeks. So that means that at that initial setup, you're at 450 parts per million, but you're only replacing 20% that's at that 450 parts. The rest of the 80% of the water that's still in your tank, corals are going to be using the salt out of that. So you're going to have to dose. You're not going to be able to get past that long term. Eventually, the ratio is going to switch and it's going to catch up to you.
But in a smaller tank with the types of corals you would put in a smaller tank, do you think it would be easier to, do you think that you're going to go from 450 to 200 in a week?
No, not at all. Not at all. And with a lot of the corals out there, I mean, there's a lot of tanks out there that even with instant ocean, if you're doing a lot of soft corals and some of the easy LPS corals, you might get away with very little dosing and they might be just fine. You won't necessarily get amazing growth, but the corals are probably going to be just fine. A little dosing would be better. They don't use it that fast. It all depends on the corals that you're keeping. And I think that if you're keeping corals that are going to be using minerals, you need to dose. And if you're going to dose, start from a number that you know.
And
even if it's low.
Think, I'm just trying to interpret what I think that you're saying about it is basically that first round of water changes. You might start at 450, and then in that 2 weeks, now you're down to 400, but a 20% water change might only bring you back to 420.
Right. However that math works.
Right.
It's exactly what I'm saying, yeah.
It'd be interesting to test it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you got to test it in a high growth system and a low growth system. What about if it's soft corals?
Right.
If it's soft corals, so many of these conversations become easy.
They do. They do. At that point, something to help maintain pH and alkalinity.
Yeah.
And they're not going to use up much of the minerals anyway.
Yeah, regular water changes with instant ocean might even just be enough to maintain where you need to be.
For sure.
Because corals are a very diverse group of animals.
Right. A lot of my reef tanks early on, and I mean, we're talking in the 90s when I was doing a 40-gallon tank with 2 hang-on-the-back filters and some AquaClear power heads to try and move the water. I did water changes, but there weren't additives. I mean, there were some, but we didn't use additives. And my green star polyp and my mushroom corals and my Kenyan tree corals and my leather corals did great. That's what we had back then.
I have a discussion which might be scary for some of the people listening who come from freshwater and are very attached to doing things a certain way. If you have amazing circulation and you're doing good regular water changes where you are stirring up and vacuuming out, do you need a filter on a saltwater tank?
Oh, I know some guys in the aquarium club, some of the old school guys that would definitely say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it just seems natural that, you need one. But the filter at that point is just there to take out the actual particles, the physical stuff. So,
okay, so you break that down to the 3 types of filtration: mechanical, chemical, and biological. And all of those 3 things, regardless of your aquarium, have to be accomplished. If you are stirring everything up and vacuuming gravel and you have circulation in there that's keeping the detritus in suspension, when you do your water changes, you're pulling out your detritus. There's your mechanical filtration. Live rock is, I'm going to say it this way. Live rock is by far the best biological filtration media in existence. Right.
Part of me just wants to tease you and be like, what about Seachem Matrix?
If you could put as much Seachem Matrix in a tank as you would put live rock, then maybe.
Yeah,
It still wouldn't be as good because
Yeah.
live rock is so much more diverse. There's so much more of a diverse flora and fauna layer on real live rock.
But
That-
what if you're starting with dry rock like everyone's doing?
Then
these
you're
days?
not doing as good with your filtration, your biological filtration, as if you had live rock.
Ooh, I had to fight the urges to boo just because I know it's definitely the fashion right now to do dry rock.
It is.
Not into it.
I know.
In a nano, I could see it being more successful, but then at that point, you're running it like a freshwater tank to me.
Yeah.
You need like
Yeah.
a real filter on there. The rocks are mainly decorative,
Yeah, and eventually they're porous. They're going to grow good bacteria, and you're going to move water around it, and that bacteria is going to colonize the live rock or the dry rock, and then it's going to be good, but not as good as live rock. So there we go. We addressed mechanical and we addressed biological filtration with your no filter tank. Now you're doing water changes. You're pulling out the chemicals and replenishing the minerals. Yeah, do it without a filter. Circulate. Gotta circulate.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the original design for a reef tank was proposed by a guy named Lee Sing. It was the Lee Sing method, and it was very similar. Only they were using some rudimentary protein skimmers, but it was circulation and
interesting.
live rock. That was it. Yep, and we're talking like the mid '70s, late '70s was when the Lee Sing method came out, and we had these. I remember seeing them. They were still around in the mid '80s when I started looking at saltwater. I didn't set up my first saltwater tank until 1990, but I was definitely looking at them. And it was this acrylic tube with a wooden air stone.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, they were functional.
Yeah.
And at the top of that tube there was a little bit of a cone, but not really, and then a collection cup.
Beautifully
And it
simple.
sat in the tank. It didn't have a bottom, so the water was pulled into the protein skimmer from the bottom. And the wooden air stone produced these really cool teeny tiny little bubbles, and you had to replace those like every 6 weeks or 8 weeks because they would get all clogged up.
That's awesome.
Yep, that was where protein skimmers started, and reef tanks. I mean, that was
I would think
That was it.
I think before that, the most success most people had was being as close to the ocean as possible.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
It's amazing where it is right now, where you can just put together a reef tank
yeah.
easy.
This is the part where we plug that breeding orchid daddy back book video.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to hear Ben's story about that.
The one where I throw a book, you have to listen to the
yeah.
video. Yeah. But my first saltwater tank was a Nano. It was a 10-gallon tank with an underground filter. And the place that I bought it from, the guy had some really cool ideas about live sand. Only we couldn't get live sand. But he said, okay, you're going to do this 10-gallon tank. You're going to take water from my tank, which it was tap water mixed with instant ocean. And the undergravel filter and I had an air stone on one of the lift tubes, and I did actually have a power head on the other one. So it was kind of split that way. But he scooped a bunch of sand, and actually it was crushed coral at that point. So the chunks were like 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 millimeters in size, and put that over the top of the undergravel filter about 1.5 inches thick. And I had a clownfish and a damsel, and they did fine for a while.
That's awesome.
That was my first one. 1990 in my college dorm room. So there we go.
I feel like we need to asterisk the live rock thing, though, because I feel like some of the issues that people have had and the reason why some people switch to base rock is bad live rock. It's got to be good live rock.
Right, that's true. That's
like
true.
live rock that's not full of disease and nasty bugs and things.
Aptasias. Aptasias are really...
They're among like the best hitchhikers you can get, I suppose.
That's because you like aptasias and the rest of us know you shouldn't have them.
Okay, but they're not stone crabs. Come on.
Well, that's true. Stone crabs are vermitid snails. And
Yeah, they are a manageable risk.
True.
Not like fresh collected from the ocean or being maintained in some random guy's basement who lost his whole tank to ick and then wants to sell off his live rock.
Right. And medicated with copper and... Yeah. And then let him sit in his...
It's like soaked up like 8,000 milligrams of phosphate in
Right.
the process.
Right.
Trust your source.
Trust your source.
All right, what else about nanos? We really digressed there.
It's amazing how sometimes we can make something so complicated, but really what it comes down to is those 3 types of filtration. And as long as you're accomplishing that, that's really what counts. I know, Charles, you have a saltwater tank that's like super simple.
I have 2 now, actually.
You have 2 now?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
One of them is just outside that range. I got a 20, and then I got a 30, and they're both pretty simple.
All right.
The 30 is a little bit more traditional in the sense that it's got a hang on the back filter. I run polyfilter pads in it, and I do my water changes. I scrub algae if there's algae, and that's really it.
What's in it?
Right now, just the blue stripe clownfish in the 30.
No inverts.
No inverts right now.
Okay. Live rock?
Yeah. Live rock, live sand, a little heater, and I also have a Seche pump to circulate in the horizontal direction. It's on my to-do list at some point. I'm going to upgrade the light, and then I'm going to start putting corals in it because that's the tank in my bedroom, and Alyssa has requested that at some point I start putting corals in there.
Yes, dear.
Honestly.
Yeah.
But I don't think my maintenance for the tank is going to change once I start adding corals because I'm just going to like zinnias and mushrooms.
Right. Easy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll get plenty of leftover mice shrimp or whatever.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Have your clowns spawned?
No, they are too young.
Okay.
They got a couple more years. But then the 20-gallon is actually being like it's just finished cycling. It's the tank that's being set up for that Hellfrix firefish downstairs.
Oh, right.
It's a 20-gallon. It's so simple. It's literally live sand, live rock, and a sponge filter run on a power head.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, because that firefish, that's going to be his home.
That's it, right?
That's it.
Right.
Yeah,
Maybe
it
at some
checks
point-
all the boxes.
Yeah, it checks all the boxes. My bioload's going to be really low, but it's a really nice fish, so I kind of just want to spoil him and give him space.
What light do you have on it?
I don't.
Are you gonna?
I haven't decided yet because Hellfrix are a deeper water fish, so I haven't figured out if I want to try and simulate like a true deep water tank, and I don't know what that would be yet in my mind.
So if you put a lid on it that just had like a small opening, and then did a Kessel A80 like 2 feet up, so you'd get this dim beam that would just come through part of it.
Yeah, with just the right blue.
Yeah.
But if you could get those rays like they're drifting down from the surface, that would be so gorgeous.
How much light does a colt coral need?
Not much.
Oh.
Because I can never remember what they're called. There's this really touchy kind of coral that lives in pretty deep water. It looks very similar to a colt
It's
coral.
Nepthia.
Yeah, but it's
Nepthia.
nowhere near. But colt coral is, bulletproof.
Yeah. Nepthia is a non-photosynthetic.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
the
Nepthia.
carnation corals, right? Are
Yeah.
the Nepthias? Yeah.
Yeah, Carnation's
No?
not a Nepthia, but it's in this. Oh, maybe
They
it is.
look similar. Hold on, I need to look it up. I'm sorry.
Well,
Just because I want to know.
While she's
Yeah.
looking that up, I've literally seen pictures of that type of coral
Oh.
right next to a firefish.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I've thought about simulating that look, but I very much don't want to commit to a non-photosynthetic.
Right.
Personally.
Yeah. When a Nepthia is like, for the first 10 minutes after you having it, it looks amazing. And then it slowly starts to die.
Oh.
You would have to overcomplicate your filtration system for a Nepthia. But a colt coral, it's a very similar look.
Yeah.
And it's photosynthetic. And it's brown, so it doesn't need much light.
Yeah. That hits all the boxes for me.
Yeah. Yeah. But even a Kenyan tree at that point is close.
It's
But
true.
I'd still do the cold.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just a little bit more loby.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks a little more deep water. And doesn't have the reputation of a Kenyan tree.
Or like even maybe one of those neon green sinularias or something would be
Oh, yeah.
really pretty too.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool if you kind of skewed, because if you're trying to simulate deeper water, if you skewed the light a little bit more blue.
Mm-hmm.
You'd get that glow,
Yeah.
which I think it would play off really well against that. Like, what color would you call that Hellfrix firefish? It's
I
like
would-
not an orchidy color, but
I would call it a lavender.
yeah,
Me personally.
yeah.
I'd go with that.
Yeah, nice, lovely purple shade.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like a purple firefish, only that somebody took to like one of those chop shops and souped it up.
Yeah.
Right, like a
Some spinning
custom
rims.
shop. And, yeah, just like added some extras.
Yeah. This is definitely one of those. That was not my original plan for that tank.
No?
This is a digression very quick here, but that tank was originally slated to be a colony of betta pugnecks.
That is a huge
That's
difference.
quite the jump.
That's quite the jump. But like Alyssa came in
Yeah.
and I was kind of like, oh man, this fish is really cool, but I'd have to really shift gears and it's going to set the record for the most I've ever spent on a single fish. But then it would also mean I've owned at some point every species of firefish. And she looked at it and she goes, he's cute. We should get him. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that was all it took for me to completely change the plan for that tank.
I like it.
So that's the story of how I'm setting up that tank now.
Before that, what's the most you ever spent on a fish?
Oh man, probably a purple firefish, honestly, because they're market wise they're like $70 each now.
Right.
So when I say I'm setting a record for myself, I'm setting a big record for myself.
Oh yeah. What about you, Amy?
What's the most I ever spent on a fish?
Yeah. Or so sometimes we come across deals, right? So the fish you have had that would today be worth the most.
I think it's not a fish, but I think my mantis is the most. But I did just bring home both those green phantom plecos on Friday.
Oh, you did?
So if you count the two, that's definitely the most. But
Right.
I think my mantis was like $80 or $90.
Okay.
And I think he's the most.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't go too fancy. I don't know. Like, I keep my stuff pretty simple.
I had a Chrysalis angel for a while.
Oh,
goodness.
really?
Oh, he was so pretty. I got an amazing deal on him.
Well, yeah, and I've owned one marine fish, and it was
That's right.
$5. It was a yellow-tailed damsel.
We'll see if your mantis shrimp would eat it or not. And he didn't, right?
He didn't eat it until I moved, and then he did.
Right.
Or it died, and then he ate it.
But you still have a mantis right now, right?
Yeah, I have a mantis right now. It wasn't him. It was a smaller one.
Yeah, but now you have a peacock mantis.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have thought about putting that 6-line wrasse in there.
Okay.
I knew you wouldn't be mad.
I don't care.
See, this is really delving into. This is why I really, really like the size tanks that I work with in saltwater.
Mm-hmm.
I have a 30-gallon committed to my dream clownfish pair.
Yeah.
I'm about to have a 20-gallon dedicated to my dream firefish.
Right.
Those tanks are designed for that thing.
We did a whole podcast on designing a tank around a specific fish, and it has so much value. It's such a great plan. And that's, I think that really delves into what some of these nano tanks can be, is where if you've got that amazing fish and it's not too big, design a tank around it and have that be it.
Yeah.
Show it off and love it.
Yeah, because these are low-tech tanks, but in my head, for these fish, I'm not compromising anything. I'm not trying to get them to work in a community. This is their home.
Yes. And anybody that has that, but the fish will be lonely. No, that is not a thing with reef fish. They want all of the resources to themselves. Think of reef fish as being really, really selfish. Okay, there are a few of them that do actually do a little bit better in pairs, but most of them, they got all of the resources. So they got their own hiding place. They got their own food source. You're not going to breed your fish anyway, so don't worry about that. That is fine, having just a singular
Everyone's
fish in there.
leaving me alone? Perfect. It's like when a kid from like a family of 15 moves out on their own, right?
Right.
Are they lonely? No, they're like, thank you, it's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Is this what silence feels like?
Think of all reef fish as mad, crazy, insane introverts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they do definitely, that chaos does bring them out more because it tells them that predators aren't out. But once they settle in, you're not going to have any issues
No,
with them
I
being
agree.
lonely.
So some of the best fish to me that I love to see nano tanks designed around are Watchman gobies. Mm-hmm. They are some of the most amazing personalities and flamboyant colors in reef fish that sometimes get lost in big reef tanks. Mm-hmm. That Yashahazi goby, anybody who's listening right now, if you're not driving, Google Yashahazi goby. They're incredible. Those paired with a candy pistol, that's a combination that's really hard to beat.
Yeah, you really can't. It takes a lot to make a big tank feel full.
Mm-hmm.
Like that 220 probably has 10 fish in it. And it's just getting
We
to
can
like,
put more in.
it kind of feels full.
Yeah.
A 10-gallon tank, that 10-gallon tank with 2 1-inch fish in it feels full.
It's a complete system. Yeah.
And it's hard to really quantify that, but I feel like it's easier to feel satisfied with a nano aquarium.
Yeah, for me, the only way this is not scientific at all, but the only way I know how to describe it is that like it's easier to look at a smaller tank and think that's a home for something.
Yeah.
You know?
I see what you're getting at. I understand the idea behind what you're saying. And you're right. It's scientifically we're trying to personify something.
Yeah. Whereas like that 220, the best way I can describe it is it looks like there are empty rooms in the house.
Sure. I get it. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We should fill them.
Yes. Yeah, I think my brain just wants like every crevice to be full and inhabited. And it's never going to happen in a big tank because you have to stop eventually. Like the fish that we're choosing are larger. And yeah, we totally have more room. But like, if we got more fish, it wouldn't make it look like a busy reef no matter what you do. It's still going to make it look like a reef tank.
Mm-hmm.
Every nook and cranny in that tent is functional right now to the fish that live in that tent.
Do we have sexy shrimp in there?
No, we had a cleaner shrimp in there. A skunk.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Cleaner with the cleaner.
Oh, yeah. We should put sexy shrimp back in there.
Hey, listen, if you will get us sexy shrimp, we will put them everywhere. We've probably got 4 people on the list for them right now.
Oh, yeah. They haven't had them for a while, have they?
No.
Dang it.
So, no, guys, if we get them, you get them first. I promise. I promise. But then we'll put a bunch of them in there.
It's not for you. You know who you are.
Mm-hmm. You don't deserve them.
Right.
Jimmy.
No, Jenny, you're fine. Don't worry about it.
So, you know us. You guys have been listening to this podcast for a long time, and thank you for that, by the way. But you know that we can't go into a topic without getting into the ethics of it. It's just something that's integral into who we are and what we do here. And we have to touch on this. We have to touch on, but I'm going to get a bigger tank someday, right? Or, but, you know, it won't grow that fast. We started out this conversation by defining a nano tank and saying there's no such thing as a tang that can go in a nano tank. What are some of the other ones that are like, you might want to try it, but don't do it? 20 gallons or smaller.
Rabbit fish. I know Amy said it earlier, but that one's a tough one for me.
People are going to see, like for a while, and actually I haven't seen them for a while. I'm actually glad about it. But for a while, you could buy 1.5-inch blue tangs. They were common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Wrasses, that's definitely a tempting one. They are physically generally pretty small. The possum wrasse being the exception. Absolutely put a possum wrasse in, I don't know, a 10-gallon or more.
Yeah.
But
that's it. That's the only wrasse.
Fairies, flashers, and any other larger wrasse,
they need to roam.
Yeah, they might only be 2 inches long when you get them, but they need the space. Don't do it.
All of the Centropise angels except the Atlantic pygmy, which is our guy, and it's either African or Brazilian flameback. And there are 2, and they're different species. One of them gets a little bigger than the other. I cannot remember which is which right now.
I don't know the Brazilian and the African. I have the impression that it gets about the size of a coral beauty.
It does not get as big as a coral beauty.
Okay.
But it gets bigger than an Atlantic pygmy.
Okay.
The Brazilian, the difference really is the color of the flame. And the African, it's more orangey, and the Brazilian, it's more yellow. And I think that's the one that stays smaller as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one.
I haven't seen them in a while. But so those are the only two species of angels that I would put into a tank 20 gallon or smaller.
Yeah, and a 20 gallon designed around them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Only, like, not just a random 20 gallon.
While
Yep.
we're on the topic, there is one centripage that you and I have talked about in the past where you said just outside of that range. Let's just touch on that real quick, just for someone listening. You've mentioned that coral beauties you'd be okay in the 30?
Barely. You're really good at taking care of your tank. You're meticulous about it. Coral beauties. And there's a couple of others in that complex. A shepherd's, not a flame. They're going to be a little bit bigger. A fisher's. And there's one other in that complex, and it's escaping me as to exactly what it's called right now. But those in 30 gallons, set up right, done carefully with careful tank mates and proper maintenance, meticulously, I would be okay.
Comfortably in a 40 breeder?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Most of the centropage angels, I would say, could go in a 40 breeder.
Okay.
Ooh, I've got a good don't do it. Algae blennies.
Algae blennies.
They
good
are
call.
fairly small and fairly inactive, but they will starve.
They will. As much as we've tried.
And a sand sifting goby is too small for a 100 gallon tank,
Right.
even though they're only 4 inches long.
Right. Yeah. They will definitely starve.
Mandarins.
Yeah. Dragonets in general. Every single one of the dragonets.
If you had a trained mandarin, particularly if you had a trained mandarin that's already on pellets, I could see doing it in a macroalgae 20 gallon tank.
You know what? I think I agree with that.
But you don't.
Right.
So don't.
So don't do it.
Even that, I feel like they deserve more space.
Yeah,
'Cause to
20
me,
long,
they
I
fall
would feel.
under the category of very similar to a fairy wrasse, where it's like, yeah, it's small, but it likes to roam.
I don't know. When you watch some of the videos of some of the dragonet territories, particularly the Mandarin dragonet and the green spotted, they're gonna carve out this little coral skeleton area, and they're not gonna go far. And by not far, I'm talking less than clownfish far, like 2 feet.
Yeah,
and
they
they're gonna
will
live their entire
circle
existence.
it constantly,
Right.
but
Yeah, and you'll have a lot of them will do like this harem breeding thing, where you have this one male that will patrol his teeny little territory, and in that little 2 square feet, there'll be like 6 females and a male.
Yeah, I'm still iffy on that. Like, I know that about them, and
Yeah.
I'm still like, ugh.
Yeah, Mandarins, dragonets just make us sad.
yeah. All right, do we have any other setup nano tank stuff? We talked about filtration a lot. We
Yeah.
talked about lighting enough.
We should touch on picos.
I want to touch on something else real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think we've ever talked about in the podcast what size sand we like to use and why.
Right.
Because that's a really important detail.
Yeah, I hate sugar sand.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think it's okay if you're using it to supplement a more coarse sand for burrow digging organisms. And I think that's the only situation.
I don't know, all the burrow digging organisms that I can think of want bigger chunks.
No, I don't disagree with that. But my idea is that a lot of them come from habitats that have varying size things.
Mm-hmm.
So that just gives them a little bit more variation in what they can use.
Nope, still don't like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'm so negative when it comes to sugar sand, because there was definitely a push for a while from a lot of I'm going to say very educated, very public reefers that said that's the best sand to use. And so a lot of people bought into that. And my experience with it has always been your power heads are going to blow it around more. So you're going to have bare spots. And you're going to end up with deep spots because it's going to get blown around, and there's going to be less water that can flow down into those deep spots, and you're going to get anaerobic conditions in some of those spots. And then trying to clean that, don't even think about putting it in an acrylic aquarium, right? But even in a glass tank, particularly a low iron tank where it's very scratchable, you're going to end up scratching your glass with that stuff because it's going to get caught in your magnet. I mean, it's just, I don't get, and I haven't ever had a chance to have the deep conversation with one of those guys who is like, sugar sand is the best and is also like really educated on the topic. I just know that I don't use it.
Yeah, I can think of literally one situation where I want it.
Garden eels?
I was going to say stingrays.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I can think of two situations where I'd want it.
Well, are there any marine stingrays you should be keeping?
Yes, there are two of them.
There are two of them?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Fish.
for a different podcast.
I know, right?
Entirely different topic, but like that's me trying to convey how narrow me personally think the usage of sugar sand is.
So there are very few places in the world that the sand is sugary.
That's true.
And it is definitely the case like in the Gulf Coast where there are lots of stingrays, but none of those stingrays are aquarium appropriate. So one of the stingrays is found off the coast of Peru. The other is found kind of throughout the Coral Sea. And that's not going to be powdery sand.
I'd still want it.
Yeah.
Just because their skin is so sensitive.
Right.
If I can remove that, and they're going to be stirring it up.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's
stirring it up and moving it into your filtration system, getting it caught in your magnets, and
yeah, I'd rather deal with that than a bacterial infection.
Talk about a digression from
I know.
nanotanks,
I'm sorry,
right?
but
a stingray, and talk about no. There is not a single stingray that could go in a single nanotank. There's not a single stingray that could go in a moderately sized reef aquarium.
But this is my very roundabout way of saying, if you have a nanotank, don't be putting sugar sand in
No. No. Nope.
So pico tanks.
Pico tanks. Fishless pico tanks of a half a gallon. Put a cute little light on there. Put some snails in it. Put
Maybe
some corals
even
in
just an air stone.
Yeah. And maybe a sexy shrimp.
The thing with nano or picos is, if you're not doing fish, then you get a lot of wiggle room to mess around with some of the really, really hardy organisms that exist out there. Some of those corals, an air pump with an air stone is going to be as much circulation as you need. For macroalgae, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Fish are by far the heaviest bioload in a reef aquarium.
No question.
Inverts just do not have the metabolic demand
Right.
that a vertebrate has.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, those 1 inch neon gobies that we've been talking about probably have a smaller bioload together than the 2.5 inch cleaner shrimp we've got in there, I would think. Or at least close.
Opposite.
What?
The cleaner shrimp has a much smaller bioload.
Yes.
Yeah, the much smaller
Strike that,
bioload.
reverse it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, the cleaner shrimp that's probably 2.5 inches has a smaller bioload than the 2 gobies.
I think that's accurate.
I fully believe that.
Yeah.
And is probably appropriate on its own for like a 2-gallon tank.
Yeah. And then sexy shrimp. We've talked about sexy shrimp a lot, and there are all kinds of people going, get me some sexy shrimp. And we've been trying. That is like for a pico tank, man, those are just the bomb.
They're just the perfect intersection of gorgeous, awesome personalities, and hardy and easy to feed.
And cute.
Yeah.
And cute. And they
And-
wave their little butts in the air.
Virtually no bioload. There's like no negative on sexy shrimp other than they're not as breedable as freshwater shrimp.
Yeah. Well, and they're small.
Yeah.
So they're only appropriate for nano or pico tanks.
They're also slime eaters. So like they're almost self-sustaining in a tank with Kenya tree corals and like a little bit of flow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They're cool. Yep. They're cool.
Nature's crazy.
Yeah. So pico tank, pico light, that is the tough one.
Yeah.
And there's an Eheim light that we've been experimenting with, and it's okay.
Meh.
Amy doesn't like it.
I don't like it.
I like it. I haven't found something better.
No, I haven't either.
It's just not great.
I wonder. It doesn't have a lot of blue on it, but I wonder
Right.
if that like a lifeguard that we've been using on the Betacubes.
It'd be worth trying.
Worth a shot.
If you're doing macros, I think it would probably be a home run. If you're doing corals, I don't know if it would just grow more algae.
Yeah. An A80 turned way down, but then you're still talking $100 and some light.
Yeah.
Yeah, well. Yeah,
It would
there's.
look really cool.
It would look really cool.
That would be the ultimate. Going ultimate, that'd be the most expensive thing you'd put in the whole tank. But
I mean, those wave point blades are just a simple white and blue. There is a 6-inch version, but
True.
it's still a little too big for a lot of the Picos.
right. Tempting.
I don't know. Somebody's got to make it.
Well, somebody out there has got to have a really good idea for light for a Pico. When I'm talking Pico, I'm saying maybe 2.5 gallons or smaller. Although in the 2-gallon rectangulars, there are some options for lights. But now we're going even smaller than that. We're keeping like a coral head or two, and a couple of sexy shrimp.
In that case, you're only going with hardy corals anyway.
Yeah.
So low light is the most important thing.
True.
Overlighting is just going to kill your corals just
Causes
because of
some
how much
problems.
algae it grows.
Yeah. So show us some of your ideas. What are some of the other cool topics? What do we miss? Like, what's your like, oh, but dude, my nano tank is so cool, and this is what I do, and it works. I want to hear about some of those ideas. We're always looking for new ideas when it comes to nano tanks because it's kind of like this, everybody's coming out with these new products and these new techniques, and hobbyists are the best resources for some of those techniques.
It's hard to keep up. We're really just kind of wading into this world over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So we've got some experience in it, but we'd love to hear what your guys are too. That's how we make it better.
Right. As a team.
So be sure to send any of those emails to podcast@watercolorsaquariumgallery.com, or you can find us on Facebook. We'll usually post a discussion question on these topics, but also, send us some pictures. I would love to see what you've got set up. Check us out on our YouTube channel. We should have some good saltwater videos up there for you. Check us out on Instagram and on our TikTok.
Oh, and there's a great TikTok of those little neon cleaner gobies
Oh,
too.
yeah, they look so
That's one of my
cute in their
favorite
little
TikToks. I
hole
love it.
together.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't get over it. It's too precious to exist.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening. Let's have lots of fun and keep those hands wet.